We'd like to give a special thank you to Pure Project for hosting the Society of Barley Engineers. Thank you.
All right. Yes, we're doing Czech Lagers. This was a great movie back in 1981, Stripes. Bill Murray was going into Czechoslovakia to rescue some of his soldier buddies, and his quote was pretty applicable, that it's only Czechoslovakia, it's like going into Wisconsin. Well, what's great about this quote is Wisconsin is kind of the birthplace of American lagers as well, and they come from Czechoslovakia. So I'm Chris Van Hamersveld. John Bell is going to be presenting part with me. We've presented before. You should know who we are. All right, so we're going to get started. So first of all, some geography lesson, a little bit of history. One of the things I love about European beers is the beer comes with so much history, and it's so tied to culture and food and everything that the past has to offer. I find that our craft brews in the U.S., it's usually like I brew whatever I want to brew, and there's no history behind it. And the history may be, oh, I went to the beach, now I want to have a Mexican lager. That was about it. So Czechia, also known as Czech Republic, they recently changed their name to Czechia. For the last 30 years, this has been the country. Before that, it was Czechoslovakia, and Slovakia was down here. 100 years ago, it was part of the Austrian Empire. 400 years ago, it was part of the Holy Roman Empire. So the history of this area goes way back. The area that's in purple here is called Bohemia. And then we have Moravia and Silesia. But most of the beer that we know comes from the Bohemian region. A couple of notable places. How many people have been to Prague? Right on. I love Prague. It's such an amazing medieval city. Pilsen, this is where Pilsner Urquell comes from. All right. I've never been there. I would love to go there. České Budějovice. This is where Budvar comes from. And then our hops come from Žatec, and our grains, if you get the floor malted Bohemian grains from Weirmann, they actually get them from Benešov, just south of Prague. Okay, so the rise of brewing in Czechia, or in Bohemia. Sorry about that. It started back in 993. Back then, during the Holy Roman Empire, only monks were allowed to brew. By law, it was preserved just for the monasteries. But in 1250, still under the Roman Empire, Pope Innocent IV lifted that ban, and they started to allow nobles to brew. But he put in place this mile rite. And back then, a mile was actually 14 of our miles. So within a 14-mile radius of your noble town, nobody else can brew. So that created a nice exclusivity. You could brew just for your little area. And then in 1356, Charles IV, so anybody who's been to Prague, the Charles Bridge was built by, he was the one who ordered the building of that bridge. He's also known as Wenceslas from the Christmas Carol. He changed the law so that almost anyone could brew. By the 1600s, we had almost 3,000 breweries in Bohemia. Then the 20th century came. 2 world wars and communism. The 3,000 breweries went down to 53 breweries by the end of the century. It was really bad. But then at the beginning of the 21st century, once communism lifted, they became a more capitalistic, free society. They were able to start making more craft breweries. And so now we have, I think it was over 500 as of 2020. Also notable, for the last 30 years, per capita, Czech Republic or Czechia has the highest alcohol consumption in the world. I actually looked at the chart. They are by far the most alcohol drinking country per capita in the world. I think the United States is like 30 or 40th. We're way down there. So we got some work to do.
We're doing our part.
There you go. All right, so from 993 to the present, 1,000 years of brewing. Originally, it was ales, and I think all of Europe was ales because lagers weren't actually discovered or invented until the 1400s. So they had two kinds of ales that they were brewing: a white beer that was made out of wheat, and a barley-based beer that they called a red beer. Then when the lagers were invented, they were slowly, over time, gaining in popularity, but they were cloudy. So it was a stored cold type of beer, but it wasn't the lagers that we know today. Then in 1842, a Bavarian, thanks, John, a Bavarian brewer moved to the town of Pilsen in Czechia and invented the Pilsner. The popularity of Pilsners took off, and that pretty much took over the entire world. Today, the Pilsner and the lager is the most popular beer style in the world. All right, so this is where we're going to start serving our first sample. Who's had Pilsner or Quell on draft in Czechia? All right. Okay, so I've had it in a bottle before, and I thought it was a good beer. And when I got to the Czech Republic, I wanted to try a local beer. And the beer server said, no, the only thing we drink here is Pilsner or Quell. It's like, all right, when in Rome, drink their beer. I couldn't believe how different and how great that beer is on draft and served the way that they serve it. Later on, I'll talk about how they pour this beer. It's amazing beer. And in the bottle, it's still a great beer, but when you drink it draft, it is unbelievable. Okay, so John and I are going to switch. Hey, John, you want me to take over the pouring?
Okay, so before I get in, I'll give you a little background. So I'm John Bell. Some people get Chris and I mixed up because we brew a lot together and we hang out too much together. And so it's like, I talked to John. I'm like, no, you didn't. That was Chris. So anyways, so I'm John Bell. That's Chris. And when Jacques sent out the email of, does anybody want to do a presentation on Czech Lagers? And I have brewed a amber Czech Lager, double decoction, and I served it to Chris, and he loved it. And then he went to Prague and came back. It's like, Czech Lagers, Czech Lagers, Czech Lagers, Czech Lagers. And then Jacques sent out his email about Czech Lagers. I'm like, I'm going to be presenting with Chris on Czech Lagers here in just a minute. And within half a day, Chris had messaged me and say, yeah, I'm going to do the Czech Lager presentation. Half hour. He had replied to Jacques, says, sign me up. And I got signed up too. So here I am. They're a great style. And it's interesting how we'll go through kind of the characteristics of the Czech Lagers, and then we'll get into BJCP, and then we'll have more beer. So as far as we know, or in the U.S., we know the styles of the Czech Lagers. We know them as pale. Oh, and by the way, I don't speak Czech at all. So he speaks it 100 times better than I do. And so he put all these Czech words on here that I'm gonna butcher. So bear with me. Anyways, so we've got the pale. We think of Czech Lagers in kind of three categories: pale, amber, dark, and black. In Czech Czechia, they go by alcohol. So it's more of a tax thing. So they go, light, below 4, a draught 4 to 4.5, lager 4.5 to 5.5, and a special above 5.5. So technically, if you had a matrix of beers, you could have like 16 different styles between the pales to the versus the alcohols. Did I skip one? No. Okay. BJCP has it in categories of basically light to dark. So you got the pale lager, a pale premium, which we'll go through specifically the categories, amber lager, and a dark lager.
So it looks like it just
Yeah, it just wrapped around a little bit.
So it's pale, amber, dark black,
Yeah.
and then all the drafts and one light.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get a little more technical, but not technical. So if you look at the pale beer in BJCP, it's basically the one with a lower gravity, obviously a lower alcohol, and the IBUs are kind of scaled with the gravity. As you go to the premium actually stands out. And as you go left to right, we're going to get darker. And the color is the primary difference, except for the premium lager. The premium, Czech premium, you can see that the IBUs are 30 to 45. But the gravity stays the same. The amber and the dark have this lower IBUs than the premium. So that Pilsner Urquell that you just had has the more IBUs. And Chris is going to go deeper into that Pilsner Urquell later. So it's interesting that the only thing that changes as we go across, except for the premium lager, is the color, pretty much. But that premium is going to give you more IBUs and more bitterness. And what's interesting, when I think of a Czech lager, I'm thinking more malty, more maltiness. But as you go to the BJCP descriptions, and this is from BJCP, refreshing, hoppy, bitter is in the descriptions, even in the pale lager category. And if you look at, and it makes sense, because if you look at the IBUs to the gravity, or the BUGU that we like to call, you're looking at a 44 over 35, so you're around 0.8 BUGU. We did an experiment on IPAs, and the BUGU around favor the best, I should say, most favored, was about a 1.0. So you're actually pretty high on the BUGU scale for this style. Now the premium, once again, it goes up to 1060, but you get up to 45 IBUs. So this is considered malt and hop character with a long finish, complex. Bitterness is strong, clean, but lacks harshness. And I think lacks harshness is the key, and especially with the Saaz hops, gives you that. Doesn't give you that harshness and that roundness. So the Pilsner Urquell you had is bitter, but it's not IPA bitter, but it's low, just a little lower in IBUs than some of the West Coast that we have. But it's very, very smooth. And you can drink a lot of it. Now, the amber shifts gears a little bit. So the amber lager reduces that BUGU a little bit back down to 35, but keeps the OG higher. So that's going to drop it down. You're adding more of those caramel type malts, maybe some Vienna in those. So it's going to be more malt forward in this style. So this gets to my impression of a Czech Lager. The amber Czech is more maltier. So hop character can vary from quite low to quite significant. So there's a huge variation in these BJC guidelines. So you're going to get a lot more malt. It's going to be bready and biscuity too, and sweeter and caramely. So now we get to dark lager, which the description makes this category kind of wide open. If you look at this category, it's going to be dark. Obviously, it's a dark lager. Malty Czech lager with roast character that can vary from absent to quite prominent. Okay, so that's pretty much wide open. Malty balance is interesting. Hoppy that provides a range of possibilities and interpretations. So, you take that Schwartz beer and maybe throw it in the dark lager category and see what happens. Because this description is quite wide open with the specifically with roast. But once again, the SRM's going up, but that the IBUs has been constant through the last few styles. Oh, it's time to drink more beer. Yay.
Yes, this is actually Budvar. They call it Czechvar. Okay, so while that's being poured out, I'll talk about how to brew an authentic Czech lager. This requires a unique process, requires some additional equipment, and some specific ingredients. So first, what is grain modification? This is important because of the ingredients that we're going to use and the process that we're going to use. Well, first of all, grain modification, it's simply the germination or malting process of taking... Yes?
Can I get you to hold the mic up closer? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Sure can. Okay. It's the germination or malting process. It breaks down the cell walls and it makes the starches and proteins accessible to the enzymes. Full modification or fully modified malt takes around 11 days. And it goes from just being a seed to sprouting, as if it's becoming the next version or the next plant that it's going to grow. Some interesting stopping points are chit malt. Sometimes we'll use carafoam, sometimes we'll use some flaked wheat to try to bring out some body and flavor, and recently we've started to use some chit malt. Well, chit malt is really just barley where they stop the malting process or germination process on day 3. So it's high in proteins and high in beta-glucans, but it's low in the accessible starches, so you don't get a lot of sugars out of it. It's not very fermentable. Under-modified, which is what we use in the Czech lagers, is on day 9. They stop at just short of full modification. And when we do decoction, which I'll show in the next slide, that helps to complete the process that's left by those last 2 days. Yes, pour me some, please. All right, so what is decoction? Decoction is basically taking a portion of your mash and bringing it to a boil and then reintroducing it back into your mash. This makes more starches available to the enzymes. It increases your extraction efficiency. And a very interesting side effect, if this goes back in history, you could mash without a thermometer. You don't need to know, am I at 145 degrees, 158 degrees? The decoction takes care of that for you. As long as you're pulling the right amount from your mash, boiling it and reintroducing it, it raises your whole mash up to the next enzyme point. This is before they even knew what enzymes were. They figured out that decoction actually does it without a thermometer. One of the side effects, and it's a really nice side effect, is you get an enhanced flavor and enhanced clarity by doing a decoction. The Maillard reactions help to caramelize some of those sugars and gives you a slightly darker color. You can see it a little bit in Budvar, a little bit in Pilsner Urquell. If you were to just do a Pilsner, straight Pilsner malt lager, it would be quite a bit lighter than this. Budvar does a double decoction, and Pilsner Urquell does a triple decoction. So they're boiling the mash and getting those Maillard reactions. It also helps to break down the proteins, and that's where the clarity comes from. It's also interesting that they have this seal of quality in Czech Republic. Wines have this, and I think this is the only one I know of in beer where based on where the beer is made and how it's made, it can get this seal of quality, the protected geographical indication from Czechia. And I checked all the beers that we have here, all say that they have this seal. Sometimes they'll put it on their packaging, sometimes they just put it on their website. This rose to in prominence in the late 1700s. Yes.
Hang on, please. Where did you buy it? Microphone.
Where did you buy it?
Where did I buy this beer? Holiday Wine Cellar in Escondido has an amazing supply of beer. Not only is it an amazing supply, they have a beer cave. And they have Belgians and Germans, and it's heaven in there. It's great. Yeah, I definitely recommend going there.
And Friday night they have a happy hour from 5:30 to 7:30 for like $8. They give you like 8 samples. So North Escondido.
Holiday Wine Cellar on Mission. Okay, so in addition to the unique process, we need additional equipment to do a decoction. This would be more of a commercial setup where you have your mash tun with paddles in it, and then you have your directly or indirectly heated kettle with a wort pump that draws from the mash tun over to the kettle. For decoction, you also have a mash kettle and then a super powerful pump that can pull a portion of your mash into the mash kettle, and then directly heated or indirectly, if you have a steam jacket, raise the temperature of the mash to a boil. Generally, you need some way to stir it in there as well. Could be, I just use a spoon, but it could be paddles or rakes or whatever from a commercial standpoint to move the grains around so they don't scorch while they're boiling. Okay, so the authentic ingredients. Floor malted barley, which is the semi-under-modified barley that I talked about earlier. It has an earthy, malty flavor and an intense aroma. It can bring out notes of biscuit and honey. During the decoction process, those Maillard reactions can really make those shine. Melanoidin is a good alternative if you don't want to do decoction. I happen to enjoy a 10 or 11 hour brew day, so I really like doing decoction, but it is a lot of work. Availability. I know that Travis has all 3 of these malts because I'll be serving a beer later, and I got all the malts from him. The floor malted Bohemian Pilsner, that is the big base malt. And as I noted on the first slide that showed the map of Bohemia, even though this is a German maltster, they source the grains from a maltster in Czechia, in Benešova. And an interesting thing is that that maltster was originally owned by Archduke Ferdinand, the guy who was assassinated, that started World War I, that ended up killing most of the breweries in the Czech Republic. The floor malted dark malt, I put that in my amber that I'll be serving later. And also the Cara Bohemian is about a 64 to 83 Lavi bond. So it's a darker malt, like a caramel 80 or crystal 80. Authenticity. So if you want to make an authentic Czech lager, as I said, Weirmann does package these straight from the Czech Republic. You are using real Czech ingredients. And what I noted about Archduke Ferdinand there. Okay, the hops. The Saaz hops is the traditional choice. I think I've heard of some Czech Pilsners made in the U.S., made with Hallertau and other hops, but Saaz is really the right flavor. You get that earthy, herbal, little bit of a spicy flavor. I can taste it in both of the beers that we just had. It gives you some mild bitterness. It is low in alpha acid, and I think I even noted, the 2023 crop, normally Czech Saaz is in that 2 to 6% alpha acid range. Because of climate change in Europe, they've been having a lot of trouble with hops, and this one in particular was only 1.7 in 2023. I don't know what the 2024 hop, it's also low. Yeah, it's really struggling. So as an aroma hop, great. As a bittering hop, it would take a lot of hops. So you do have to use something outside of Czech Republic if you want a bitter with Magnum or something higher. For authenticity, make sure that you do get Czech Saaz. It comes from the Žatec region, which is where Pilsner Urquell gets their hops. It's just northwest of Prague, as opposed to U.S. or German. I think there's even is there a French Saaz as well? I know there's U.S. and German Saaz. Make sure it says Czech Saaz if you want to make it authentic.
Are they available at SoCal Homebrew Supply?
Yes, I know. I've asked Travis. Travis does have Czech Saaz, or has access to them if you want them. Yeast. We actually have quite a few options on yeast, which is kind of surprising. Originally, I only knew about the 800, which is the Pilsner Urquell strain. But as I researched, I found Wyeast actually has a couple strains. And in addition to the 800 strain, White Labs also has the Budvar strain, which is the 802. And I know that there's some slight differences in them. I've never used the 802 versus the 800. I've always used the 800. But as a lager yeast, you ferment it cold. I do a diacetyl rest with it just to make sure I don't get any diacetyl. Diacetyl is an acceptable flavor in Czech Pilsners, but at very restrained levels. And it's so hard to get a restrained level of diacetyl. The advice is don't go for it. Just do a diacetyl rest. The two Wyeast strains, the H strain and the D strain, I did a little research on those. I've never used these before, but apparently the D strain was a much older strain from Pilsner Urquell, and H is their current strain. So if you use Wyeast, you have some interesting historical options to choose from there. Authenticity. So both of these strains are from the Czech Republic. They are very authentic, but as with any yeast strain, there can be drift over time. I don't know when White Labs did their poll from both Budvar and Pilsner Urquell, but those strains, they even say this, their strains will change over time. It's still very close, but there will be some change. Yes?
I have a question from Stan. In your research, did you run across any dry yeast that you could use?
Stan, I did look. I wanted to have a stand bullet on here. I could not find any Czech strains in dry format. Now I know White Labs is converting a lot of their strains into a dry format. They haven't done this one yet. So maybe eventually they'll get to that. 3470 is not from Czech Republic. I think it's Weihenstephan, actually, Germany. Travis.
So just a comment for the Yeast, the 2001 and the 2000. If they have the PC at the end, those are their seasonal releases. So if you see it, get it because it's not going to be around for long. So.
Okay. Good note. All right, water. We've all heard of this soft, very soft water in Pilsen. This is very true and very important for this style. You want very soft, virtually RO water to make an authentic Czech Pilsner. These are the water reports from Pilsen. One is from Beersmith, the other one's from Brew and Water. There's almost no minerals at all. I don't even think that my RO is getting them this low. So for authenticity, soft water with the floor malted grains is the way to go. And if you don't believe me, I'll be serving a beer later that used this profile. And Pilsner, I know Pilsner Urquell uses this profile. I don't know about Budvar. But just keep it as absolutely low as possible. And then use acid to adjust your pH to make sure that you're going to get your proper mash conversion. Yes?
Hang on, Andy.
Do they adjust pH with acid, or do they do acid rest or something like that? What do they do?
I was not able to find any information on what they did with pH. The decoction process does have an impact on pH. I've actually not measured what that impact is when I do it at home. It may be decoction actually corrects for it because it pulls out things from the husks that may lower the pH down, but I don't know. I don't know what Pilsner Urquell does. That's a good guess. And that would be my guess, is decoction does it. Yeah. So my pH that I shoot for in the mash, I shoot for a 5.3 pH, and then at the end of boil, I shoot for 5.2. I will not correct the mash pH, so I will calculate what the mash pH needs to be, and it usually ends up between 5.3 and 5.45. And then during the boil, I actually do correct that one. I'll add a little more acid to the boil and finish right at 5.2 before going into the fermenter. But I don't know what their acid is. I don't know what their pH is for Pilsner Urquell. I do have a lot of information I'll show on a later slide of what I've gathered from them, but pH, unfortunately, is not one of those. All right, next beer.
More beer. Woohoo. Any comments on the Pilsner Urquell versus the Czech VAR? Completely different? Completely the same?
I like the Budvar better.
Oh, you like the Budvar, and why do you like that better?
The Saaz hop was a little less. I think the Urquell has a much more punchier hop to it.
Yep. That's what it's supposed to be. It's a premium.
Yeah. I agree that the Urquell was a little bit more bitter, more hop character, and the Urquell had a little bit of the acceptable diacetyl. There was definitely a little bit of that there at an acceptable low level. And then the Czech VAR was a little bit softer overall.
Right. And I got a lot more caramel sweetness out of the Czech VAR as well.
Yeah, I like the Czech VAR better also. And like Chris mentioned, there's a little bit of diacetyl in the Urquell. And I almost feel like it would be better. Urquell would be better if they were using the cans. The Czech VAR was really nice in the cans. I mean, it tasted really fresh. And I think I would attribute some of that to the cans. So that was really nice. So, but for me, that was an amazing beer. And I kind of felt like the Urquell, I felt like it would probably have been better if I was drinking it in the Czech Republic
Well,
or
yeah,
in Czechia.
absolutely. And so these beers did come from Holiday Wine Cellar, thousands of miles away from Czechia. So don't know how old they are, everything else. So I have not had the pleasure to drink them in draft, but someday I'll get over there. All right, so you're drinking Rebel next, and it's another premium pale lager. So you can do a 3-way taste. So if you're lucky enough to go to Czechia, there's 4 breweries that are kind of famous in Czechia. Pilzinski Bradzova. So I'm going to miss that, I'm sure. So founded in 1842, and this is where your Pilsner Urquell is going to come from. So that's number 1 on the map. And Pilsner Urquell actually means the original source or fountainhead of Pilsner beer. So that's where the Pilsner beers originally came from. Budvar, and we'll talk about Budvar more in a little bit. Let's see. Founded in 1895, and it's in a big legal battle with Budweiser. And we'll jump into that legal battle a little bit more. And it's in the southern part of Czechia. Staropramen is in Prague. So we have 2 breweries in Prague, number 3 and 4. Staropramen is one of them since 1869. So these breweries go very far back. It's the number 1 beer in Prague. Okay, not in Czechia, but the number 1 beer in Prague, because Pilsner Urquell is not in Prague. So it is the number 1 bill, but it is available in 35 countries. Ufleku, it's also in Prague, founded in 1499. So it's another old one. Now, they do a blend, and it sounds like they're blending somewhat of a Keller beer with a lager beer. So a Keller in German means the cellar. That's my interpretation of this is naturally hazy, unfiltered, and pasteurized Pilsner. So that's an early lager. Derek, we'll get you in a second. Derek needs a mic, Andre. Andre. Comment. And they're going to blend it with their more mature lagered beer.
Yeah, so Ufleku only sells dark lager.
Oh, they only sell dark.
It's not a Pilsner style.
Oh, okay.
It's only dark lager.
Okay.
You can't. And let me tell you, they are aggressive with it. They are aggressive with it. If they see you with an empty glass, before you know it, there's another full glass in front of you.
It's like Kolsch. They have a light and a dark.
Oh, they only had dark when I was there, so that might be a new thing.
Light and the dark. We have proof. So yeah, when it said unpasteurized Pilsner, I thought a cellar beer. All right. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Budvar or Budweiser? So before this presentation, if you asked me this question, I would have said that Budvar came before Budweiser, and Budweiser created their recipe based upon Budvar. And many years ago, I had a Budvar, the early 90s, someone went to, brought back a Budvar to a meeting, and I tried it, and it was the most wonderful beer that I had, and I'm like, what did Budweiser do to this beer? They ruined it. But then Chris created this slide, and I'm like, what? Founded in 1876, 19 years earlier than Budvar. Okay? So That misnomer is out there, or I thought it was. I was wrong. Won't be the first time, won't be the last. But yeah, so Budweiser actually was founded before Budvar. It's named after the German of its hometown. They're going back and forth, and we'll get into this. So the Ardware Budweiser is a geographical indication referencing their town of Budvar. So, but Budweiser, as we know, was founded by the Bush, was inspired by the beers of Bohemia and brought that back, used adjuncts of rice, and created his own Pilsner. So they argue that they built the Budweiser brand internationally, and Budvar stole it. So these guys are going back and forth of who did what first. Interesting enough, their marketing is very, very similar as well. We have the Beer of Kings or the King of Beers, which is quite interesting. It'd be nice to have a timestamp on those marketing logos because they go back and forth. But if you look at these two brands, they're kind of toss-up globally, but basically Budvar, Andre Ryan's going to have a question. Budvar is regionally in Europe. It's going to be called, is predominantly in Europe. It's hard to get it over here. But we can get it, and it's not named Budvar. We got Czechvar. So that's how they get it away with it. Budweiser in Europe is just called Bud. So there's differences between the two, and there's kind of regional victories between the two. Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, does anyone listen to the podcast from Craft Beer and Brewing? Because they did a really good podcast with Greg Casey. Most of us might know Troy Casey, who started he started AC Golden, doing some really nice, American style lambics. Founded it was Casey Cellars. Maker knows this. Anyway, he pointed out in this podcast that most of us think that a lot of these lagers that they started in Europe and then came here. But what he talks about is it was actually, we were very contemporary, and that's what that site just proved. Right. We were actually contemporary with light lager here in the U.S., along with what was going on in Europe. We were just using local ingredients, which where the corn thing comes from.
Corn and the rice thing comes
from. And so I suggest you... He wrote a book for the Master Brewers Association. It's extremely expensive, so hopefully at some point they do a lower price version, so you don't have to be a member of that. But listen to that podcast from Greg Casey at Craft Beer and Brewing, because he really talks about how, a lot of these lagers, we were simultaneously doing this while they were doing that in Czechia and Germany and all that. So it's just something to keep in mind, and that slide kind of shows you that that was actually the case.
Right. There's also a Food Network, not Food Network, the Food That Built America has, I think it's on the History Channel, they have the rise of the lagers and everything with Stroh's and everything, which is very good. Stroh's versus Pabst and way back when. Also very good. Okay, so I think we are ready for more beer.
All right. There's an actual Budvar. All right, this next beer does not come from Czechia, comes far from Czechia, comes from San Marcos. I made this one. I did everything I could to make an authentic amber lager. So following all the rules that I talked about in those previous slides, this uses all authentic ingredients. Thanks to Travis for sourcing me on most of those Bohemian grains. Okay, so last couple slides. I wanted to go into how Pilsner Urquell is made. I put a lot of research into how do they make their beers so that I can make an most authentic Czech lager that I could, or Czech Pilsner that I could. I found that they do use a floor malted Bohemian malt, but they malt their own and they kiln their own. So there's no information on how far they take it, how far do, like what day do they stop germination, and how do they dry the grains before taking them into the mash. They do a triple decoction, and I was able to get their exact temperature points. They dough in at 95 degrees, and then they do 3 different decoctions to raise up to the different temperature points. Now, using physics, there is a formula that you can use based on the size of your mash. You can determine how much you need to pull to boil and add it back in to hit these different temperature points. I was able to find that formula, and I use that formula today. I don't know how they decide how much they pull, but they do it, and they do hit these temperature points. So they do a protein rest, then a beta amylase rest, and a very high-end alpha amylase rest before mashing out. They do a 120-minute boil. Given that it's a Pilsner malt, that's a good idea to prevent any DMS. 120 may be excessive. Andre's bringing the microphone to you.
I just had a question on those decoctions. How long do they do those for?
They do a 15-minute boil on each one, and they raise it all the way up, so there's no stops on the way. I do a beta stop, because I want to make sure I use or an alpha stop, sorry. I take my decoction up to 158 degrees and hold it for 15 minutes to get the enzymes out of that particular portion of the mash before taking it to a boil. Because once you take it to a boil, you've denatured all the enzymes in that portion of your mash. So I do add an extra step in there that they don't. They raise it all the way to the top. And then they boil for 15 minutes and move it back in. They do source their hops from the Žatec region. And I was able to find this interesting number that they put in 350 grams per hectoliter, and they assume a 3.8% alpha acid content. From that, I was able to then calculate, okay, from a hectoliter, let's get it down to ounces per gallons. Roughly about half an ounce per gallon, or in our size of 5 gallons, it's about 2.5 ounces of saws that we're putting in. Again, assuming 3.8% alpha acid. I was able to find also that they do a first wort, an 80-minute, and a 25-minute addition. So all of that hop flavor is coming from a pretty early addition. That 25 minutes, you'd think that most of the flavor would be gone, but it's not. They still have a lot of that earthiness and spiciness from the hops. I then was able to find that for that 25-minute addition for the flavor, that they use the equivalent of 0.19 ounces per gallon, and then the rest of it is equally split between that 80-minute addition and the first wort addition. Now, anybody who's done first wort or done any research on it, there is a theory that if you start the hops in the mash temperature as opposed to at the boil temperature, that the flavor molecules, the flavonoids, terpenoids, they actually get somehow protected from the boil, through the boil. And I don't know how true that is, but I know that my Czech Lager actually has a lot of Saaz flavor by following that course, by doing a first wort as opposed to just throwing them in at 60 minutes or 90 minutes, or in this case, even 120 minutes. So they do go for 40 IBUs. So with an original gravity of 48, that is about a 0.9 BUGU. That's an IPA level of bitterness. And it's so soft, it doesn't come across as that kind of bitterness. So lagering, I think Derek, you just showed me a picture of these barrels here. The barrels are in here. You can kind of see them in the background. They would traditionally lager in these used oak barrels, and they would just use the barrels over and over again. I think they were like 12 feet tall or something. They were massive. So they're not going for barrel aging. They're just going for lagering. So it's cellaring or the ice cave for lagering of the beers. But now they primarily use stainless steel, and they just go for 4 to 5 weeks as opposed to 3 months in a oak cask. So if you want to make a traditional Pilsner Urquell style beer, there's your steps right there. And it's a lot of work. 10 or 11 hours a brew day. All right, last slide, the art of pouring. So those of you who have been to Prague, you know that when you order Pilsner Urquell, it comes with a lot of foam on top. And I remember first time I was in Belgium, somebody warned me before I even went into a brewery or into a bar, just expect a lot of foam on there because Americans aren't used to it. Well, craft brew Americans, we are used to it, but most people aren't. You want beer right to the top. Okay, so the way that they pour this, I think there's 3 different pouring techniques that they use. For Pilsner Urquell, they like this one called a smooth pour, this Hadlinka pour. So this is the standard pour. They start by having the glass at a 45-degree angle and building a foam head really fast. So this couple of inches of foam starts at the bottom really fast. Then they sink the faucet into that foam and fill the beer from the bottom so that it captures all of the aromas and all the flavors of the beer underneath the foam without just letting it go off the top. I'm sure that there's some science to this. I don't know what it is, but the first time I had one of these beers, I was sold. Everywhere I went, I wanted a Pilsner Urquell. And in a bottle here, like I said earlier, it's a good beer, but the way they pour it is amazing. I think they even have classes they send their beer tenders to learn how to pour this style. All right, so that, I believe, is our last slide. So, question?
I believe they're offering a smooth pour of their Pilsner in here.
They do a smooth pour?
Yeah, you can see it advertised on the menu up there.
Oh, I got to see that. All right, so I will take questions. Na zdraví is how you say cheers in Czech Republic. And questions?
It's not a question, but if you go to Pilsner Urquell and they pour the beer right out of the cask, it's a little deceiving because there's a stainless steel tube that enters the cask that you can't really see unless you're looking hard, and then it comes out the little petcock. So the beer is not really coming out of the cask.
It's actually I was there. It's actually the unfiltered version of the beer, and it is delicious.
Behind you.
For the decoction, is it roughly the same amount for each stage? So if you're doing decoction 1, 2, 3, are they roughly the same size?
They're very close in size, but again, it has to do with the physics of where you want your temperature points. So I do a double decoction. I don't do a triple. Budvar also does a double decoction. Okay. So I dough in at 132 degrees. I do a 145 rest and a 158 rest. Well, 132 to 145 is so many degrees. That requires a certain size of decoction. Yeah. And then 145 to 158 is slightly bigger jump, so I need to pull a little bit more. So there is a formula on how much to pull.
Do you think you could share
it's roughly,
that formula?
roughly about 1.2 gallons or so.
For what batch size?
Excuse me?
For what batch size? 1.2 gallons for 10 gallons?
I do a 5-gallon batch, but I will. I usually make a 6-gallon batch because of all the losses in my system.
Okay, thank you. Do you think you could share the formula
I sure
if you
can.
have it online?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll put it on the SBE distribution list.
Sorry if I missed it, but so was your recipe on your amber, was it just the floor malted with a decoction that caused the color, or did you have any specialty malts?
Besides the floor malted Pilsner, I use the floor malted dark, which is kind of like a Munich in its lobby bond. I think it's around 6.6 lobby bond. And then I use the Cara Bohemian, which is around a 75 lobby bond. And then I used a touch of Carafa dehusked, Carafa 3 dehusked for the color, just to get it in there.
Cool. Any other questions for Chris and John? Derek.
So I think this is a beer that actually, classically, diacetyl is not welcome in beers. But I think with a lot of these Czech-style Pilsners, just a touch of it is appropriate and welcome. And what it comes across as is kind of like a, almost like a hint of butterscotch and like a fullness in the mouthfeel. And you really notice it in the beers over there. It is actually just the right amount, and it tastes really good. And you'll notice that, like, whenever I have a Czech-style Pilsner in the U.S., it's usually the thing that I'm missing when I try it. And it's hard to quantify, but if you ever get the chance to try, like, a really good, fresh actual Czech lager, you'll taste it in there. And you won't be able to untaste it afterwards.
I agree, and it is just a touch. And because getting just a touch is so hard, it's not even worth it for us to even try. I've tried, and I made a diacetyl bomb.
Went too far in the other direction. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? All right, let's give a big hand to John and Chris.